Hello everyone, and welcome to this video in which we'll be presenting an analysis of CAT 2025. So we'll be going through all three sections across all three slots of CAT 2025. So we have been taking the paper for the last several years, and this year also all three of us have written the paper. Kushal and I have taken the paper in Slot-1. Ajay sir has taken the paper from Slot-3. Slot-2, we have had some faculty members of GradSquare taking the paper, and we have also spoken to some students. So based on second-hand information, we are going to be assessing the level of difficulty of all three sections across all three slots. We'll be comparing the difficulties across all three slots. We'll be talking about what would consist of a good number of attempts, what could be called a good score in the paper, and we'll speculate a bit about what would be the cutoffs for different percentile marks. So that's what is going to be the agenda of this session. So let me start off straight away with Slot-1. So Slot-1, let me start by talking about the VARC section. And that is the only section in this year's paper which saw a change in the pattern. I won't say pattern, but in the kind of questions that are present as compared to CAT 2024. In CAT 2024, in the VA part of the paper, we only had odd sentence parajumbles, summaries, and fill in the blanks. This year, parajumbles questions made a reappearance. So they were a staple of the CAT paper since quite some time. I think since 2016, 2017, 2018 papers, we used to have questions of parajumbles. So this year they made a reappearance, and the VA part of the paper was split into 4 types of questions of 2 each. So we had 2 summaries and 2 parajumbles and 2 odd sentence parajumbles and 2 fill in the blanks questions. Apart from that, the 16 questions of reading comprehension remained the staple as it has always been. So not a major surprise. I don't think that it was a major curveball in terms of the pattern of the paper. In terms of level of difficulty, I felt the passages were pretty standard, what you would expect a standard CAT paper to give you as topics of discussion. I think we had some passages from topics like statistics. We had some passages from say topics like income inequality. So these are the kind of topics that CAT likes to explore. Then we had topics from arts. Like there was a passage on electronic music and whether it's considered to be real music or not. So these are the kind of topics that you would expect in the CAT paper, not something that we all read generally, but then these are the flavor of the CAT paper and mostly picked up from Western sources. The questions were also not very difficult. I felt that in comparison to CAT 24, I felt the difficulty level was pretty similar to last year's paper. Maybe people are complaining that in some questions the options were long, like there were 3-4 line options, so people who are averse to reading might have found it difficult to read the options. Sometimes some questions actually did not make much of a sense. For example, in our slot, we had a question asking the meaning of a phrase. The phrase was sui generis. So that is a French phrase, and they asked a direct meaning of it, and they gave one-word options, not even context-related options as what is present in the passage. So these kind of questions did make the paper, I would say, tricky, but I would say kind of a bad kind of a question to put forth in front of the students. But majority of the questions I felt was easy because the wrong options could be found out to be wrong. They were easily eliminatable. So I actually felt that the reading comprehension part of the paper was pretty simple. VA as usual was 50-50. Half of the VA session I would say were pretty simple and doable. The remaining half was a bit tricky, a bit of moderate level difficulty. For example, in one fill in the blanks question, I felt that the sentence just given could fit into any of the 4 blanks of the paragraph. So that did make some VA questions tricky. But overall, I did not find it to be way more difficult or way more easier as compared to CAT 24. So I would expect people and students to perform very similarly as they did in CAT 24 as well. And I personally actually enjoyed giving the paper because the passages were things that I'm interested to read about. And that helped me finish the paper with around 9.5 to 10 minutes in hand. So Kushal, did you feel the same way about the VRC section?
I felt exactly opposite of what you said. I really felt that the paper was slightly more lengthy to my mind, because when I had taken about 10-11 mocks alongside students, I felt that I was able to finish the reading comprehensions comfortably and was left with always a 5-6 minutes of time in my mock papers, which I found myself struggling on this paper to complete even the reading comprehension part of the paper. I'm generally not a great reader, so it was expected that I'll not be able to finish the entire paper. But the point being that me struggling with 16 reading comprehension question made me feel that the questions were slightly more lengthy when they were framed. I also felt that there were questions, and which was the good part of the reading comprehension, that I felt a lot of questions were around the central idea of the passage, which is where I felt that if somebody has gone through the thread of the reading comprehension, properly, they would be able to at least attempt 2 out of those 4 questions comfortably. But the other 2 was where the challenge was. That the other 2 were, some of those were inference based, or some of those were further application based questions, slightly more in the side of critical reasoning rather than a straight reading comprehension kind of a problem, which is based only on the comprehension piece or some data present in the reading comprehension. So that is where I felt that the paper was slightly more challenging. Also, the point that you mentioned, I believe that the options were framed very long. And generally what happens is that when you read those 4 options, it turns out to be another passage being read there. So that adds on to the difficulty level of the paper. So I felt that English was slightly more difficult than the last year paper, but not extremely difficult.
Alright, so I would say that definitely some valid points that I can agree with. Like, for example, the critical reasoning questions that you mentioned, there was an assumption-based question. There's a question where we had to have parallelism-based reasoning, that which of these options is similar to the logic followed by the argument or the passage. So those kind of questions are definitely difficult. Plus, there's a logical structure question which was missing from the last 2 years' CAT paper, where they had given 4 options in which there were 4 words, and they asked that which of these options best represents the flow of the passage. And those kind of questions were definitely tricky. So I would say, yeah, there were some tricky questions, but overall I will agree with you, and I have to admit that I did not find the passage or the paper, the section of VARC to be way more difficult as compared to CAT 24.
So let me just clarify for the audience that Varun happens to be an individual who loves to read a lot, and variety of diverse set of reading that he has done throughout his life enables him to perceive the passages a lot better in comparison to probably the rest of the student crowd. And hence, if at all any student listening to this feel detachment from Varun's opinion, I believe that's still fair. You are probably in the majority, because as I said, there was a passage which was on statistics. You had normal distribution, and Varun typically loves the topic of statistics. So it was easier for him to understand. By virtue of being with him throughout for the last 6-7 years, I have picked up some amount of statistics. So I also happen to have enjoyed that particular passage. But I think somebody who's from arts background would not understand what that normal distribution curve is, what is that tailed outcome is all about. So I thought that the passage was slightly more difficult in comparison to the previous year.
So that's absolutely possible. I can see why some people might find the section to be a bit lengthy because of the unfamiliarity with the topics of discussion. So I will concede then, after listening to your opinions, they're probably slightly more difficult than CAT 24, but not much more.
Not much difficult, that's for sure.
Alright, so let's move on to the next section. Let's talk about the LRDI section. LRDI 100%, without a shade of doubt, was tougher than CAT 24. I think it had to be tougher. CAT 24 was, I think, one of the easiest in terms of the DILR section. I don't think that we will find another CAT paper, at least in the near future, which will be as easy as CAT 24's DILR section. The sets were, I won't say long, but I would say that they had limited amount of information and clues. So a lot of them required a bit of trial and error, a bit of making cases, making multiple different tables, and rigorous and meticulous solving before you can arrive at the answers. Plus, there were almost no questions that you could just solve without solving the entirety of the set. I felt that IIM has made a paper in which they demand that a student solves the entire set, and only then can even approach the questions individually. Maybe there was one set of DI, which was the pentagon and the bar graph set, which was probably the easiest set in our slot, in Slot-1. And in that, you could solve the set partially, but none of the remaining sets were actually sets where you can pick up individual questions and solve them. You have to solve the entire set. And that makes the possible number of attempts go down for students, because you cannot just pick up 1 or 2 questions here and there. You have to sit and solve an entire set, and that will take time. So I felt personally the 2 sets which were the easiest were number 1, the DI set with the pentagon and the bar graph set, and number 2 was the set on train. There's a train traveling between stations A to B, B to C, C to D, and D to E. And there were 200 reservations that the people can actually take up, and you had to calculate how many reservations had booked in every single station and how much of the train was occupied. I think both of these were numerical logic sets, and both of these were very solvable. The remaining 3 sets definitely, I wouldn't say definitely, but in my opinion at least, they were nowhere close to being as simple as these 2 sets. So Kushal, do you have any difference of perception?
No, not really a difference of perception, but I just want to add one point to that conversation, that in this particular paper of Slot-1 LRDI section, the question selection or the set selection was a very, very important thing to watch out for. Somebody who would have gone into the other 3 sets, which you did not make a mention of, those 3 sets were definitely difficult. So the ones that you have spoken about were probably the easiest sets available on the paper, but the other 3 were seriously difficult, because in all of those 3 sets you had to do a lot of iteration before you could come down to the answers of those, and that is what adds the difficulty level of this particular part of the paper. Now, another thing that we need to understand is that the 2 sets that we have picked up were the easiest, and you will be probably left with a 10-12 minutes of time after doing these 2 sets. But the problem is that in that 10-12 minutes, you will not be able to solve the another set to your tally. So that is what makes 2 set attempts absolutely correct. Is a very good attempt to my mind on that Slot-1 LRDI.
100%. So, just like you are mentioning, I took the first 6 to 6.5 minutes of the paper to read all the 5 sets before I decided which one to pick up. So I picked up the DI set based on bar chart, and it was just a bad day for me in terms of calculation. Maybe it's just karma coming back to bite me, because I have been mocking students for not being able to do basic calculation in my classes. And today my brain just stopped processing calculations. I made a lot of calculation mistakes. In fact, I could not even get to the correct answer of a question because whatever I was calculating was not present in the options, even after checking my calculation 5 times. So that first set of bar chart, I think, should have taken somewhere around 7 to 9 minutes, I would say, would have been an ideal time. But it took me about 13 minutes to solve it. And I started the next set, the train set, when I had 20 minutes left. And that set I solved very smoothly. But after solving that set, I had 7 minutes only left. And I thought that in 7 minutes, I can scrounge for pieces here and there. I can look for 1 or 2 questions to solve. So I went to that set which had the taps for questions. So 1 tap for yes, 2 for no, and 3 for maybe. And I thought that maybe some cases I'll be able to make. From there, I'll be able to get some information to take a calculated guess at some of the questions of that set. But when I started making the table for the set, I realized that there are so many possibilities that I have to consider. I will have to make minimum 3 tables in order to figure out what should be the correct solution of the set. And without that, I will not be able to answer a single question of that particular set. And the remaining 2 sets were even more difficult. I think the rating based set, because it had 4 different quarters, you had to make 4 different tables for the different quarters. And in every quarter, a different group of 3 people were present in the 2 companies. So there is a lot of trial and error involved in that. And I felt hands down, there was a circular table set in which people were moving clockwise, anti-clockwise for 5 different turns. I think that set was diabolically difficult. It had seat numbers, it did not specify the direction of movement, and it had very less number of clues. I think anyone would have picked up that set at the beginning. They have actually made the biggest blunder that you can make it in this section. It would be impossible to conclude a set like that in 40 minutes. I feel that anyone who has done well in the DILR section should have been able to finish 2 sets. Anyone who has been able to go on to the 3rd set and solve a few questions or solve a 3rd set has had an exemplary performance as far as DILR of Slot-1 is concerned.
I'll just add a couple of points to this discussion. This particular piece of paper that we've seen in Slot-1 LRDI section, I felt that the pentagon or the grid or the pentagon plus your bar chart was very similar to one of the previous year's paper. Now the point being that if you have solved in your preparation the previous year's paper, you would have got a lot of familiarity to that particular reading of that pentagon diagram. That says the thing that your preparation was rewarded on this paper.
Absolutely. I think anyone who has gotten a bit more comfortable with numbers would have been able to solve these 2 sets quickly enough in order to have managed those 8 to 9 attempts. Anyone who has not made themselves comfortable with numbers, has not followed the evolution of the CAT paper, which favors numerical logic more than purely trial and error, would have definitely not found enough time to solve 2 sets completely. So that is our perception about the DILR session of Slot-1. Quant, Kushal, I will leave it up to you. You being the quant trainer, can you give us a perspective?
Right. So this particular quant paper, I was liking more of the previous year's paper in comparison to this paper, purely because the balance of the paper in CAT 24 QA section was much better in comparison to what we saw this year. Now, when I'm saying balance, I mean the number of questions spread across the modules. So your arithmetic had taken about 7-8 questions last year, 7-8 questions of algebra, 3 of geometry, 3 from number system and permutations combination put together. That was last year. But this year, the number of arithmetics question was slightly more in comparison to last year. So that was about 9-10 questions, and there were about 7-8 questions coming from algebra. There were about 3 questions of geometry, including the coordinate geometry question. And then you had 1 permutations combination and 1 number system based question in this particular paper. Overall, I felt that the questions were very familiar. I could not come across a question which was difficult to comprehend, or when I got into each of these questions, I ended up solving every question that I tried except 1 or 2 questions, which is where one was a bad mistake, the addition subtraction mistake, and there was probably a question more which I tried but could not solve. So there were not questions which you will get into but you will not be able to solve. Every question looked very solvable, but the catch over there was it was a bit more calculation intensive and time taking. So you will get 2 equations which are not very easy to solve. So it will require a bit of time to solve. And when you push yourself to make more attempts, what ends up happening is you end up getting calculations wrong. That is precisely what I can at the moment tell you, that I have gotten 1 question wrong, primarily because I wanted to push myself to finish this calculation very quickly and I ended up getting it wrong for sure, right? So that was one part of this paper. Now coming to going deeper into each of the modules, the arithmetic section paper was very well spread across the topics. Now again, it rewarded a lot of preparation. Your mixtures and solutions question, if you have not prepared, you'll not be able to solve. But if you have prepared, it is a sub 1.5 minute question. Again, the next question that was there on the paper was of simple interest, compound interest. Somebody who knows that topic really well will find it to be calculation intensive, but would never want to leave that question, because the time you finish reading the question, you know what you have to do in order to get down to the answer. So that was the thing. Your algebra based question, your quadratic equations, two functions given to you, straight answers are visible to you, but it requires a bit of calculation. There was 1 question of quadratic equation which I'm keeping my fingers crossed, I think I should have gotten it right, but it was dead straight. It was something like x square minus 5x plus k equals 0. What should be the value of k for the roots to be integers? If my memory serves me right, this was the question, and k was speaking, it was saying my value is 6 probably. So that is what I believe that that makes the paper on a slightly easier side, where the obvious picks were there on the paper, but the questions were lengthy. If you have ended up getting stuck at the question, you would pay a big price for this, right? So the thing that we keep telling students, that don't get into questions which are difficult. Just keep moving on the paper. This was my last statement about the QA section when I was addressing all my students, that remember one thing on QA section, keep moving on. And that was the game this time. So I believe that somebody who would have attempted anything 10 or more has done a good job on this particular QA section.
I completely agree with you, Kushal, in the sense that yes, the questions immediately told you that this is how I'm supposed to be solved. But despite that, I found myself reaching for the calculator at every other question.
Yes.
And as I said before, just today decided to be that day that my brain stopped processing calculations. And if that has happened to you, then it's a very sad state of affairs for us, because we would not have been able to attempt sufficient number of questions at all to do well in this examination. Calculation speed was actually tested. And as far as questions being very clear in terms of understanding them and in terms of telling us how to solve them, there are 2 questions which are an antithesis of this. Both ended up being a geometry question. The first one, not so much. The geometry question on the rhombus area, I calculated, and if my memory serves correctly, I came back home and I tried it again, and I'm still getting an answer in decimal points. And the question did not specify till how many decimal points do I need to enter the answer. And generally, when the answer ends up in being a decimal point value for a theta question, they do specify that. So I don't know whether that was by design or not. I got the answer as 60 point something. So I don't know whether I've calculated that correctly, whether I remember the numbers correctly or not, or maybe that was another calculation error on my side. But that was a weird question. And the other geometry question, I felt the language was ambiguous, because the question said that there were 2 chords which are parallel to each other between a diameter. I don't know what does that mean, between a diameter, something like that, in between a diameter or
separated by a diameter.
Yeah, separated by a diameter. So if I've got two chords parallel to each other, there can be several diameters between them. I don't know what diameter they are actually talking about. And if they're talking about the fact that the diameter is joining two of their vertices or two of the meeting points of the chords of the circle, then the chords will have to be of the same length. But then they gave a ratio. So I don't understand where the ratio came from. So I did not touch that question. That question was not immediately clear. But being a geometry trainer, I felt that people who had emphasized the preparation more on arithmetic and algebra would have had greater modicum of success in this paper rather than people who had focused on geometry. So that is my takeaway from this particular section. So quant, in comparison to last year, Kushal, what would you rate this as?
In comparison to last year, I believe last year there were not so many easy picks available on the paper. But at the same time, last year the paper was more logic oriented and more knowledge testing paper. But this paper was slightly more calculation intensive, and patience was the name of the game in this particular QA section.
Right. So that is our verdict for Slot-1. I think overall, I would say that the paper was definitely tougher than CAT 2024 paper, especially the LRDI section contributes more to the level of difficulty. VARC and quant, I think, can be comparable. Quant, for people who are good with calculations, might say this paper was easier. People who are better with logic, who are better prepared, can say last year's paper was easier. So it's a toss-up. But overall, I would say not very different from CAT 24 paper. Right, coming to Slot-2, we'll just go through Slot-2 quickly because I don't want to speculate too much because none of us have taken that particular slot. From what we have been hearing, VARC was very comparable to Slot-1. I think similar types of passages, similar types of questions. Even quant seems to be very, very comparable in terms of question spread and distribution. A couple of students told me that that slot was not very calculation intensive. I don't know whether I personally felt Slot-1 was more intensive, but I cannot compare my perception with this. So maybe Slot-2 quant was not as calculation intensive, but people have been able to attempt similar number of questions as students have attempted in Slot-1. So I would say quant is also of comparable difficulty. DILR, from what I've been hearing, Slot-2 seems to be slightly more easier. Basically because there were 3 DI sets, out of which 2 were pure DI. 2 of them were pure graph-based questions where you had one on a Cartesian coordinate plane, a scatter plot, and then one with bar chart. So if you could understand those plots, I think those 2 sets should have been doable. Plus there is a ball in hoops kind of a set based on diameter. You have to figure out that which ball will be fitting into which slot. I think that set, several students told me, was very doable. So 3 sets being doable, I think makes DILR of Slot-2 slightly more easier.
There was one DILR set which was mentioned in terms of author and the books. That set was also called as a set which was doable by several students and our trainer.
That is a bar chart set. So I think that bar chart set and the graph set were doable. I think there is also one weighted average set. I think people who are good with averages, who have practiced a lot of weighted averages based LR and quant, would have actually solved that set as well. So with preparation, I think one among these 4 sets, if you have picked up something that you're comfortable with, you should have been able to solve. So that's why I feel that Slot-2 DLR is slightly more easier, but apart from that, I don't think there is much to separate.
There was one difference in the QA section where students have not reported a permutations and combination question in the Slot-2, wherein in Slot-1, a PNC question was there, which was a doable question. Instead, in the Slot-2, there seems to be 2 to 3 number system questions, which I think in Slot-1, there was only 1 number system question. So that was a bit of difference as far as the QA section is concerned.
But do you think that is going to contribute too much towards the level of difficulty difference?
I don't really think that that's going to happen. And in fact, I would want to congratulate the CAT conducting authorities on that on last year paper also and on this year paper also, there seems to be an emphasis that we try to build all 3 slots on similar lines. And that is a good thing to happen. I would ideally want to see a 2 slot paper being conducted next year, because prior to COVID, we used to have only 2 slots when it was a 3 hours paper. I think again, we can go back and that will reduce the variation across the slots because you're reducing the number of slots.
I completely agree, because I think Slot-3 ends at a very odd hour. I think 6:30 p.m. in winter, it's dark outside, people are feeling cold, people want to just go home, that too on a Sunday evening, and I just say snuggle up in their blankets. So I feel sad for the Slot-3 test takers. I think that the paper should end before 5 p.m. as far as winter evenings are concerned.
I've gone time to do the paper even if it is not winter.
True, absolutely.
I've gone through that last year. I mean, and especially in a city like Chennai, you realize that it is raining every time outside. So now, when it ends, the Slot-3 ends, you come out, it's rain around, you don't know how you have done your paper, what others have done on the paper, and it is very difficult to figure out a means of transportation. If you are depending upon the public means of transportation, it's a mess. And by the time you come back home, you don't want to look at anything, right? So that's why it is odd.
And that's why I completely empathize and sympathize with the plight of Ajay sir, who have taken the paper in Slot-3. So
Also,
sir, how was
I'll say one more thing on that because of 3 slots, what ends up happening is you have to start at 8:30 in the morning, for which a student will have to get up at 5:30 in the morning. Today I saw that pain of getting up at 5:30, getting ready by about 6:15, then traveling in the Chennai rains. It turns out to be slightly more difficult again for the morning slot people as well. Everyone is not used to waking up at 5:30 or 6 in the morning.
Absolutely.
Before getting into Slot-3, I would like to also add one more thing about Slot-2. In the reading comprehension section of Slot-2, there were 3 reading passages based on science and 1 on literature.
Yes.
Now, when you have multiple passages which are based on science, students, especially engineers, find it much more familiar and easy for them to, read and understand the passage, right? So I think all 3 of them, out of that, 1 of them was on AI and the other one was on cavefish, right? So
and the third one was the most scientifically intensive because it was on measuring instruments of astronomical proportion.
Yeah, astronomy and instrumentation.
Yeah.
So having 3 science passages actually, makes it way easier for people to actually solve questions. At least read the passage and understand it way better. Solving questions will depend on the questions also, but reading becomes much more easier.
So my heart goes out to non-science students, commerce students, and humanities students. As far as the reading comprehension passages of Slot-2 is concerned, you were dealt a cruel hand, but it is what it is.
So in Slot-3, VARC section was a standard section. It was like Slot-1. I feel Slot-3 and Slot-1 were the closest of the section. Slot-2 looks a bit different from what I've been hearing from students and faculty alike. So in Slot-3, in the VARC section, there were out of the 4 passages which were there. One of them on dams and the other one on the forest act. Both were very easy reads. Also, the questions which followed had some critical reasoning questions in that. There were questions which were more inferential in that, but the reading was way easier than the other 2 passages. The third and the fourth passage, one was on tribal behavior, and the last passage, so both these passages, the last 2 passages, were quite tough for read as compared to the previous 2, right? But overall, still I would say that the passages were of almost equal standard of not only Slot-1, but also the previous year. So there's not much change in the reading comprehension part of the VARC section, right? But I felt the verbal ability part has become a bit more tougher because 2 paranormal questions there makes the paper a bit more tough, because to solve that paranormal with a theta kind of a paranormal is much more difficult, right? So I had to skip both of those.
Yeah, you have to select from 24 options, so that in itself makes it very.
And out of the 8 questions which were there, 2 of them which were para-completion question. One of the para-completion question I could not even understand where to fix it. So like what Varun said, that was pretty confusing. But one of them was very, very easy. The odd paranormal questions were also not very easy, but moderate to easy kind of questions, which you can spend some time and figure out, which is the statement that you can remove from the rest of the book, right? So overall, I would say VARC section was similar to what the Slot-1 paper was. I don't think there is too much of normalization going to happen across the VARC section, probably with Slot-2, yes, but not Slot-1 and Slot-3.
Do you have some comment on the length of the section? Because I think Kushal was saying that the section felt.
No, I found the section to be not too lengthy. It was a typical CAT section, right? Because I always used to do 22 questions. This time also I did about 22 questions. So and 2 of the questions that I left, I deliberately left it because I did not want to do it. The paranormal question, I just marked and made it.
So let's move on to the DILR section of Slot.
So I think before I got into the Slot-3 paper, I was talking to some people who were doing who came out of the Slot-1 2. And the impression that they had was that the Slot 2 was a very easy DILR as compared to that of Slot 1. So I was expecting that there would be more of DI questions in the Slot 3, but then that didn't happen because Slot 3 had 5 questions, out of which one of them was graphical. And that graph question was more of a logic-based question than even a DI question, because it was on puzzles and how much time a person has taken to solve 2 different kind of puzzles. And the graph which was there is nothing much about interpreting data out there in terms of how you do it in a pie chart or a bar chart or a scatter plot, but it was more of just looking at the graph and observing and then writing the answer. So there was an easy set. So anybody would have picked up that and understood the graph as to what the graph is trying to tell. The 4 questions which followed that was very, very much easy question to do. Apart from that, the rest of the 4 questions, one of them on balance of trade and another one on currency, both were again, number logic based question. There was another set which was on circular arrangement, and surprisingly, this is the, I think, first time in few years that we are seeing circular arrangement questions. One in Slot 1 and then now in Slot 2. The circular arrangement question was actually easy. So it was an easy arrangement question to do. So anybody who had done few circular arrangement questions would be able to easily solve it. So these are the only 2 questions, the puzzle question and the circular arrangement questions, a question which were the easy question to solve. Rest of all the other 3 questions, one on mobile and the talk time on the mobile, the other one on currency, and the third one on balance of trade. Although all 3 were data-based, I could not call it as purely a DI question. It had a lot more of logic to be applied as compared to that of DI. So rather than a direct graphical DI kind of question, which you do a bar graph, looking at calculations and doing it, this is more of number logic than DI. So, and that makes the section tougher because you can't do sit and interpret more than 2 sets and answer questions in the given time of 40 minutes. So I could do 2 questions very easily. And after that, in the third question, I was left with about 7-8 minutes, but I could not solve the third one because I found it difficult to read, interpret, and then get to solving the question, because without solving the whole set, you could not have moved ahead as well.
Story of LRDI Slot 3 and Slot 1 looks very similar.
Very, very similar.
Where if you look at that trains set in the Slot 1, it was not purely a DI based, but it was a logic involved with a DI based set. So like what you pointed out, that again DI and logic was included in one set itself. So looks a very, very similar Slot 1 and Slot 3 LRDI experience. And again, the same thing, you will be left with 7, 8, 9, 10 minutes at the end, and you will not be able to get into the third.
Yeah. So I think anybody who would have done about 8 questions in that paper should have done a good job. If anybody was able to pick up the 5 question set and solve it, and then another 4 set, 9 questions would have been a good attempt in the paper. So 9 questions, that's 27 marks with 100% accuracy, should take you to a really good score in the campaign, right? Coming to the QA section, there were 9 questions in arithmetic in the QA section, and the good thing is, there was a question on mixture, there was a question on ratio, there was one on profit and loss, there was one on 2 on time, speed, distance, 2 on time and work. So it was spread across, except for I think compound interest and simple interest. All other areas were covered, and the questions were very much doable. The only problem was most of these questions had you need to have the conceptual clarity to solve it, one, but over and above that, it was calculation intensive also. So I found, like what Varun said, I was reaching out for the calculator and trying to use the calculator more to solve the question. And apart from that, the questions, they were very easy. Anybody who has done a good job with arithmetic could sit and solve all the questions, if not in the CAT paper, outside the CAT paper for sure. It was only a matter of time, so nothing more than that. Apart from that, I had 7 questions from algebra. So your arithmetic and algebra put together, that was 16 questions, right? And out of those algebra questions, there were 2 from quadratic equation, 1 from linear equation, there was 1 from logarithm, 1 inequality, 1 on functions, right? So there were, and 1 on APG, arithmetic progression. So 7 questions there. There were 3 questions from geometry, and 2 on triangles and 1 on quadrilateral. And there were another 1 question which was there from set theory in my paper. There was no permutation and combination question, and there were 3 more from numbers. So that was how the breakup was. So no permutation combination probability question there. 1 set theory was there from modern math, Apart from that, the paper was easy, as compared to the 2020, 21, 22, 23 paper. It was way easier. I would say it was a bit more tougher as compared to the last year's paper. A bit more tough. But because it was more calculation intensive. And not only that, last year's paper also had certain questions which were straight down sitters. You can just take the question and solve it within half a minute. But those kind of questions were not there in the paper. But I would say there were no difficult questions also in the paper. There was absolutely no difficult questions. So I cannot term any of the questions in that paper as difficult. So it was outright a easy to moderate paper.
So in 40 minutes, what would you say would be a good
I would say about a person who is really good in quant's QA part would solve about 12 questions to extremely good, may go up to 15 also. But then I'm saying a reasonably good person can do 12. But I think about 30 to 33 marks should be a really good attempt in the paper.
Right, so now let's move on to talk about cutoffs. So let's go sectional first. I think we will not do sectional slot by slot. We will just talk about overall, I think, because all three slots are very comparable. So let me start with VRC.
I'll just say one thing that, why are we not wanting to talk about slots and their specific cutoffs? Because in order to predict that, either you need the data with you or you need one individual to take all three slots and then understand what is the comparable difficulty level. So it's very difficult to predict at this moment across the slots, across the sections, what will be the percentiles. What we can try and attempt is comparing the difficulty levels of all three based on the feedback that has come in. For all three papers, for all across the three sections, we can talk about a score range in which you will get XYZ percentile.
So let me start with the VRC section. I think that very similar to last year's cutoff. I think last year the 99% cutoff was 42, 43 in that range. This year, listening to Kushal and listening to Ajay Zener, maybe slightly more difficult. So I would say 41 maybe, but not more different than that.
I think about 40 plus should be a good chance of 99.
Yeah, so 40 plus should be a good chance of 99 percentile. I think 41 to 42, if you're scoring, then that should be a 99 percentile in all likelihood in the VRC section across all three slots.
Yeah.
Now let me talk about LRDI because I have some different perspectives as compared to what I've been listening on the Reddit sphere, on the cat universe of the internet, that some people are predicting that 99 percentile will go as high as 34, 35, 36 marks in slot 1. I cannot speak for slot 2 or slot 3, but I am willing to stake my reputation that I don't think that the 99 percentile will go even close to 30. I want to say 27 to 30 to be safe, but my heart tells me that it will be closer to 27 than to 30, the 99 percentile of LRDI in slot 1. Do you have any other?
I think 27 is a good attempt. Okay.
I think if I have to talk about 99, I would still give it to those individuals who are in that top 1 percentile, that they'll be able to pull off a question or two more from two slots, the two sets. So I believe at 10 questions can be a 99 percentile. We will have to give it to those brilliant brains who are able to attempt 2 5-setters or a 5-set, a 4-set followed by a question or two here and there. I think I would say that it will go closer to a 30 for a 99 percentile. So let's keep the range at 27 to 30, somewhere between that.
Will it go to 34?
I don't think so. I don't think so.
Okay, so even in slot 3, you don't think it will go to 34. So I think 27 to 30 across
maybe
all three.
Slot 2, I don't know.
Yeah, slot 2 we don't know. But 27 to 30 for slot 1 and slot 3 for sure, I think is a decent enough.
27 to 30 would be a good
expected score for 99 percentile. QA, Kushal, what do you think?
QA, I think looking at all three papers and the feedbacks that we have gotten for all three papers, I believe 10 would be an easy attempt for somebody who's looking at a 99 percentile. I think when you will try to push that number to 12, 13, 14 attempts, you will end up getting 1 or 2 questions wrong in a hurry. And that is what makes me feel that about 11 questions correct at about a 32, 33 kind of a score, I believe a 99 percentile should be comfortable.
Even in slot 3?
Even in slot
30 to 33.
So somewhere between 30 to 33, closer to a 33, I believe, should be a 99 percentile on the QA section.
I can definitely see that happening as well in this year's paper. So overall cutoffs, so what do you think? 99
about
percentile?
90. Lesser than last year for sure.
about a 90 to 95 as a score. I think a 99 percentile should fall between 90 to 95 across all three slots.
I think 95 is
too high.
Too high.
Too high.
So last year, the 99 percentile was about 91 marks.
Yeah.
My heart wants to say that it will be 88. But I am a bit afraid to say that because every time I have underestimated the 99 percentile score, it has been way more. So I would also say 90 to 95 so that if at all the cutoff goes low, we will all be pleasant.
No, I can understand why you are wanting to say it on a lower side, because last year the LRDI section was a lot easier and it gave the final push to get the 99 percentile beyond a 90 marks. This year it does not look like that easy a paper. So I can say that it can be probably closer to a 90 as a score, but a 91, 92 I'll still say, because of the lower number of individuals also.
9 to 90.
Okay. So I think 90 is a magic score that we are all looking to get to if you want to get to 99 percentile. And from there, if we backtrack, then I think 95 percentile we can expect somewhere between 70 to 75.
Yes.
And a 90 percentile we can expect somewhere between 57
to 60.
58 to 60.
Yeah, so 57 to 60, 58 to 60. And in 80 percentile, I think somewhere between 45 to 50. I think closer to 47.
Closer to a 45, 46.
Yeah. So that is our prediction for the percentiles of this year's CAT paper. So before we conclude, as usual, I always have something to rant at the end of every single CAT analysis. This year, I'm going to be ranting about my examination center. So I will mention the name of the center. The center is in Chennai. Its name was Prince Venkateshwara Padmavati College of Engineering. And I think this center was conducting the examination for the first time. And the invigilators had no idea how to conduct the examination. For example, we were not frisked at all before getting into the examination hall. They just said that put your bags and electronics into a bag somewhere separately. I saw people walking in with watches. So I saw people walking with analog watches. I don't know if people were wearing a digital watch. And I think that if someone wanted to, they could have smuggled in even their mobile phone with them, because no frisking happened whatsoever. Plus, on your hall ticket, you are supposed to put your signature, the candidate's signature, in the presence of the invigilator. And even that, the people who were conducting the examination did not know. So they started signing our admit cards themselves before I had to point out that it is a candidate's signature that they're supposed to be put in there. Moreover, to compound to these problems, what happened was that there is no desk, there's no computer desk that they have. They have a computer lab, but instead of a computer desk, they have something like our chemistry lab table, which is more like a kitchen table, which has got a granite slab, and it has, say, 2 steps. On the top step, they have the monitor. On the bottom step, they have the keyboard. And the bottom step's width is equivalent to that of the keyboard. And the person sitting next to me were 1 inch away from me. And the CPU is between my legs on the floor. So I had no place to move. I had no place to keep my notepad. None of the students had any place to keep the notepad. Plus, the servers are kept in the same room where next to me when I was taking the examination. So any problems, people were talking there near the server. Some of the people's candidates examination did not start on time. So students came and complained. And so the first half an hour of my VARC session was complete chatter. And I think that, the CAT being a national level examination for Indian Institutes of Management, which are globally renowned, needs to be conducted more professionally. I think it is unfair that the quality of centers is not homogeneous. I think there needs to be some SOPs put in place by CAT conveners to make sure the quality of centers are uniform across. At least some kind of standards, that what should be the width of the table, how much should be the distance between 2 computers on which students are going to be taking the examination. Any checks that the server room should be kept separate where the students are not sitting. I think these small things, if they can be amended, then it is going to be a much more fairer evaluation of students' comparative capability. Otherwise, if you have been dealt again a cruel hand like this, where your center was below par and because of that your concentration has suffered, your performance has suffered, then it's just a sad thing that this continues to happen with respect to the CAT examination. Hope, if at all, that this video goes to any of the conveners of IIMs, that they pay attention to this and take some measures in the future at least to standardize the level of professionality at the centers.
No, I can completely understand what you've gone through, because last year again, I also had a very similar experience where the invigilators conduct during the paper was really bad, and I had to point it out because I had nothing at stake. I was sitting in that particular room. I could come up and say that, you guys need to stay silent at least and let people write the paper. But I can understand that a student will not have that, mindset to get up and talk in between the paper and, say invigilators things that they don't want to hear, right? So it's bad. It should be conducted a bit more professionally for sure. There's always a scope of improvement. As I said, putting the paper into 2 slots would be a lot better. That will reduce the discrepancies across the slots that you are facing. Yes, I understand they'll have to manage more number of people in one particular slot, but it was conducted previously exactly that way. I don't know why are we not going back to that 2 slot arrangement that gives you a good time, that gives you break between the 2 of these slots comfortably. You can conduct the paper at, let's say, 9:30 in the morning rather than starting at 8:30 and go for a 2 hours. Conduct in the evening, let's say not 4:30 to 6:30, started at about 3 o'clock and finish it off at 5 o'clock. That makes a lot more sense to me.
Did you give a feedback?
Yes, so I gave 1-star rating throughout. I think the mistake that I made was that last year's CAT Center, I gave the same rating, and that center was disqualified this year and CAT was not conducted there. That center was better than the one that I gave it this year. So I think I brought that upon myself. That's how I'm going to be looking at the situation. But yeah, if this has happened to you, there's nothing that you can do. I think it's best to keep these things behind you now and look forward. A lot more number of examinations to go through with, because there is going to be NMAT, there is going to be SNAP, there is ZAT, there is MyCat. So a lot of more things even in this academic year to look forward to. So put any kind of bad experiences behind you and let's look forward. So that's all that I have to say in this analysis video. Thank you everyone. Take care.